With the passage of this bill, prostitution will be illegal for the first time in Canada. And let us be clear about Bill C-36's ultimate objective, and that is to reduce the demand for prostitution with a view to discouraging entry into it, deterring participation in it, and ultimately abolishing it to the greatest extent possible.
Where is it that you can purchase something legally but not buy it legally? Why don't we do that with booze?
It will deprive you from your own living.
I'm going to do it anyway, regardless of what you say or not. If I decide to go back into business, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to wind up back here 10 years later. Yes, be quiet. I won. Remember that. 15 judges. What makes you think you're any brighter than 15 judges? Judge Himmel told you, your evidence is no good in this court.
Well, she's typically, vibrant but uninformed, perhaps we could say. She didn't win. What she got was, in fact, what might turn out to be a big loss for her, and that is the impetus for the government to craft new prostitution law in this country. And as Peter MacKay pointed out to her, perhaps not to her liking. Anthony Furey is here, and joining us from Ottawa, Megan Walker and Natasha Fall. Welcome to the two of you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Megan, let's start with you. You're in Ottawa. How do you think all of this is proceeding?
Well, I think the Conservative senators, anyway, are being very responsive to our evidence. It does appear that the legislation, as it's written, will be passed. And I think it's been a very comfortable experience for us, and they're certainly very respectful to our evidence.
Natasha, explain what your evidence is and what it is you would like to see happen.
I believe that survivors' voices have really been projected at these hearings, that this is in fact violence against women, and it harms children as well. And I think that the government is getting it.
Jerry, when I'm watching these different hearings, and I've been writing numerous columns about this and doing my TV commentary, I just still don't understand why we haven't been able to delineate between people who consensually go into a transaction that a lot of people find unsavory, but it's still their choice. The lady was very vocal there with her whip, and she seemed quite imbued with a lot of free will, and people who are actual victims of human trafficking, sexual violence, and so forth. And this committee hearings continue to fail to draw that delineation between lack of consent and a consensual exchange between two adults over the age of 18.
Natasha, can we achieve that sort of distinction and go forth with the legalization of contract between two willing adults?
You just can't have one without the other. You can't have human trafficking without prostitution. And truly, I don't believe anyone goes into prostitution making an informed choice. And these are choices, let's keep in mind, that are made out of desperation. Choices that they have been misled into believing is something that is empowering. And there's no accurate job description that can really clearly describe the workplace hazards that these people are going into prostitution.
Megan, there are people who say you can't make safe something that is inherently unsafe.
So I disagree with that, and I think we can look back to many, many pieces of legislation that have been passed. And if we look at, for instance, spousal rape or domestic violence legislation, so we legislate these things because they are inherently violent. But legislation alone is not going to accomplish the goal of keeping things safe for women. What we want to do is have a multi-pronged approach that includes legislation, but also includes public awareness campaigns and the provision of services for women that want to exit or want to have counseling services available to them. And if I could get back to that point about choice, I think it's a really important thing to discuss, because what we're hearing from on the pro-prostitution side is those women that legitimately have chosen to enter prostitution. They're very loud, they're very organized, but we don't have human rights legislation or human rights concerns to meet the voices of the loudest who come forward, but in fact to accommodate those who are silent. And we know that 90% of those who are in prostitution are not there because of choice. And those voices have been silenced. They're silenced because there's fear for them in coming forward. They're silenced because they're working in prostitution right right now because they're doing it to survive. And they're silent because they don't have access to the politicians. They don't have access to multimedia. And so therefore they're not being heard. And that's why it's a difficult issue right now.
They don't have the education to even articulate their experiences. You know, there was a time where I believed this was a choice for myself. And, you know, it wasn't until I was able to flee this abusive, brutal industry that broke me down in the worst ways imaginable that I was able to see that this was never a choice. And if you look at the average age of someone enters prostitution, it's between 13 and 16 years of age. And grassroots organizations, our stats, we compared stats, and they're really not any different right across the country. And so where's the choice? You know, when you turn 18, you don't, you know, suddenly become a consenting adult.
Jerry, I've read a number of different reports and statistics. Many contradict each other, but I'd like to take the lady's statistic to say, let's say 90% of people are not voluntarily in the sex trade profession. The argument, therefore, being we should criminalize and make criminals of 10% of people who are doing something consensual.
Well, that's not the argument. I think the argument.
Yes, that is the argument
Anthony,
that many people are making.
Well, I'm going to
Jerry.
give you another one. Okay, so try this one, and that is that if we take this I think somewhat naive libertarian view, and I normally agree with libertarian views that I think you're taking, and we decriminalize, we legalize, we normalize, we make it easier then to in fact victimize even more, because then people just go, oh, we've handled that.
That's not correct at all. I've argued many times, and many folks have argued, and there's two different feminist threads here, people who find that that sex work is inherently violence against women, which, you know, they don't really have the right to say that, and then there's the other folks who do in fact find that this is a liberating thing for them to do. I don't have one stake in either of those feminist arguments, but I think it's up to folks to be able to make that choice. I've argued many times that we can hone these laws so that we allow the people who are acting consensually to not be in the criminal nexus, and create government programs, which the government has done with $20 million funding, to double down on these criminal elements. Child prostitution, Jerry, is already illegal. It always will be illegal. Beating someone up in the workplace, whether they are a prostitute or in any office environment, is illegal, always will be illegal. All these ills that we are talking about are already illegal on the books. I just want to find a way to get these people who are in the criminal nexus and shouldn't be out of there, so we can focus on going against the more heinous issues right now. That should be the priority, to actually help the victims. And nobody's really talking about that right now.
You're not going to find that way, and so we don't establish laws ever that are based on the minority views, but based on the majority views. And so what we need to fundamentally recognize is that prostitution, by and large, is disproportionately represented by women, and we need to take a look at that. And it's a women's equality rights issue. You don't see men who are entering prostitution, and fundamentally it's about sexual exploitation of women and girls. And if women had equal opportunities in society to actually...
You do see men entering prostitution. That's a bizarre statement.
No, she acknowledged that it's not, that it's an imbalance. It's not a, not a zero.
Absolutely it is. There are men in prostitution, but disproportionately it's women that are impacted by prostitution. And so you cannot say it's not a women's equality issue. It is, and that's we're arguing under Section 15 of the Constitution that we need to pay attention to that. We believe that this legislation fundamentally shifts to a women's equality issue, and that we're going to create a cultural shift for future generations, so that girls growing up actually have legitimate choices to pursue in their lives, and boys growing up are going to learn that prostitution is men's violence against women, and they're going to learn that women are not for sale.
All right, do you believe that the government, they can pass whatever bill they want because they're a majority government, but can they pass a bill? Are they on track to pass a bill that will pass muster then the next time that's taken to the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm not a lawyer or a constitutional expert, but I do know from speaking with many lawyers who do specialize in constitutional issues, like Janine Benedict, who testified today that she does believe it will pass constitutional muster. We won't know until we get there, and as we've heard today, that could take up to 10 years. And my view is that over the next 10 years, we're going to see the effectiveness of this legislation, and we're going to see women who want out afforded opportunities to leave prostitution, and we're ultimately going to see a situation as we've seen in Sweden, where we're going to create more safety for women in prostitution.
Jerry, since I've started writing on this, I've received many emails from a lot of individuals, a number of people who have said I have been in a situation where I did not want to be in prostitution, couldn't get out, they like this. Many people who say, I am a prostitute, I want to be. These were cogent emails, they were very articulate folks, and I find it very disheartening that someone like Megan is essentially saying, well, I don't really care about those people and they don't count because tyranny of the majority means that we can criminalize those individuals. Someone has emailed me, they have said, I would like the liberty to be able to pursue something that, hey, I fear you may find it personally unsavory, but that's how I want to live my life. I don't understand why there's a lack of will to actually hone these laws in a way that gets them out of the legal nexus, neither Ms. Walker nor anyone else has been able to adequately answer why there's no approach like that.
Because I'm
that's maybe-
fundamentally opposed to that approach. I believe that freedom from prostitution is a basic human right.
So
And
if there
you-
are few people out there who actually don't agree with that, you don't think that they should have the liberty to behave consensually. You're also concerned about restricting their
All right, let her
liberty.
answer because I'm way over time here. Go ahead,
I
Megan.
don't believe it is a consensual issue because any time that there's a power imbalance, there isn't consensus. And fundamentally...
That's just radical feminism
No, it's
baloney.
not.
I asked
No,
you to
this
let
is
her
speaking
answer.
from a survivor perspective. I didn't even know what feminist meant but I knew the poison that it was around me. Before I even knew what morals, the meaning of morals, before I knew the definition of feminism, I knew what I was involved with was inherently violent.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, Natasha and Megan. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Jerry.